So welcome again to the Amati Insights call. As usual, before we start, please do take a look at the disclaimer on your screen. It's also available on our website. And particularly take note of the fact that none of what we say today is meant to constitute investment advice. So it's always important to do your own research and, if necessary, seek professional guidance. So with that said, welcome again. And today's topic is industrial bioengineering, which is a subject close to our heart and important to the portfolio. Unusual subject perhaps, but so what does it mean? Well, it's really about the industrialization of microbes or bacteria. And for us, it's also a special mention to enzymes. Now, microbes are incredibly important workhorses in a variety of different industries. So traditional industries you'll be aware of, like beer, wine, baking, cheese, they all rely on bioorganisms for their production. And increasingly, in fact, all processed foods, including things like dairy, yogurt, etc., use bioorganisms somewhere in the process. So it might be for functional reasons, or it might be for things like enhancing flavor or mouth feel of whatever the food or drink is. But microbes produce lots of other things for us as well: vitamins, insecticides, herbicides, even drugs like antidepressants are produced by microbes. So we're constantly interacting with industrial bioorganisms through what we eat and drink, the fuel that goes into our cars, cleaning products. In fact, the microbial industry is worth about $200 billion a year, a little bit more, in fact, when you add these things together. So it's big business. And one particular subset of protein that's made by microbes are called enzymes. Now, enzymes are proteins that speed up chemical reactions in living organisms. So they're very important for lots of particular processes. And what they tend to do is fit together with other specific molecules to break them down. So in your gut, for example, enzymes break down complex carbohydrates into simple sugars or fats into fatty acids. So they're essential for digestion in all animals, but they can be harnessed industrially to carry out specific tasks like, again, breaking down fats or proteins for things like detergents. So the enzyme market itself is estimated to be worth between sort of $6 and $10 billion, and it's growing at about 8% a year. So a really interesting and relatively high growth market. And it's, again, one that we'll just interact with. You will interact with a lot in your daily life.
Yeah, that's not. We're not suggesting that we drink a lot of beer or eat a lot of cheese, but we do enjoy both of those products. But I mean, just to expand on what Graeme said, existing markets. We like our innovators to address large existing growing markets rather than imagining the markets of the future. And in this particular case, it's absolutely the case. Brewing of beer, dairy, fermentation of soy sauce, lots of other fermentations in food and beverages, detergents and household care, energy, bioethanol, biodiesel, those are effectively biorefining processes. There are a lot of enzymes that crunch those, or digest those feedstocks, those bits of corn and or timber that result in the production of biofuels. So big markets, and they're growing in their own right. I mean, with GDP or faster in some cases, but the content of microbes and enzymes within those is growing. So, for example, bioethanol superficially is not a fast growth market, but enzymes serving bioethanol are growing much faster because the industry is getting better and better at digesting feedstock into ethanol, making ethanol production more efficient and lower cost. And even prosaic aspects like household detergents, like washing powder, for example, the sort of performance we used to in our household goods is still a growth category in emerging markets. So enzymes are growing there as well. So it can be prosaic, but it's nice growth. It's continuous innovation, even in those everyday use cases. But they're really exciting areas of development and growth, which Graeme will dig into in some more detail going forward.
Yeah, I mean, one of the obvious ones for us that we really like is in medicine. So what they call bugs as drugs. So it's really about using microbial cell therapies for attacking things like cancer cells using engineered bacteria. So bacteria first grown in a lab, and then they're re-engineered to produce something called cytotoxins, which effectively kill cells, and they move around in your body and find and break down tumor cells, or they stimulate some kind of anti-tumor immune response in your body. So important, and again, really fast-growing, interesting area of medicine. As I mentioned, we use a lot of microbes. We have a lot of microbes in our gut. If you take all of the microbes in your body together, that's known as the microbiome. There are companies such as Lonza, which is a big contract manufacturing company, or CDMO, that's recently formed a joint venture called Bacthera with a company called Christian Hansen, which is part of a company that we own now called Novonesis. And they're developing a range of live biotherapeutic products. So, you hear a lot about products that benefit the microbiome. There is a lot of science going into these products now, and there are some real tangible benefits that you'll start to see in the market, but it's still quite early days. This area is sometimes known as nutraceuticals. So you'll have heard of probiotics and sometimes prebiotics. One of the most common of those is something called HMO, which is human milk oligosaccharides, they go into infant nutrition, for example. But they're being used to replace probiotics, being used to replace antibiotics in livestock production, because there's a lot of overuse of antibiotics, and there are issues I'm sure you'll have heard of to do with antibiotic resistance. So using probiotics instead is a much more sensible solution if we can really make it work at scale. So as Mikhail mentioned, enhanced crop protection is really important. Biofungicides, biostimulants, these things help with increased water uptake from roots, better resistance to diseases, better resistance to drought. So lots of different areas, breaking down plastic, breaking down and saving food waste, lots of really interesting opportunities.
The biggest, or one of the biggest of them all, has to be what's known as alternative proteins, and this is a classic one of those where we're going through a bit of a hype reality cycle. You would have all remember Beyond Meat or various plant-based proteins replacing milk in more and more applications. The underlying thrust of that idea is still there. Humanity consumes a lot of protein. As population gets wealthier across the world, as more and more emerging markets move into the middle class consumption patterns, we have to find a more efficient way to produce proteins rather than just rely on often very unsustainable cattle herding or kind of natural protein production. It's still a very nascent market, but opportunity is very much there. Alternative proteins were a very hot industry, really captured market's imagination, but there were quite a few disappointments along the way. But it hasn't gone away. It just takes longer and will be more nuanced. And there's really three groups of alternative proteins that are emerging or have emerged as kind of main factors for this innovation. They're plant-based proteins, which we're all familiar with, oat milk, almond milk, that sort of thing, or making veggie burgers. The cell-based proteins, which is a lab-grown meat, so taking cells of living organisms, maybe it's fish or chicken or cattle, and creating effectively chunks of muscle tissue in lab conditions, also in production conditions at scale. That's proving very hard to scale economically. Plant-based proteins have more of a taste problem. Not an issue if you're having your latte with almond milk, but definitely an issue if you're trying a plant-based cheese and don't like it. But the lab-grown meat is still work in progress in terms of making not just attractive to consumers, but also economical to produce. But there's a halfway house, which might end up being the biggest success story, which is called precision fermentation. So if you think about tofu or corn, if you remember that product, been on the UK market for many years, those are effectively fermented protein products, or vegetable or kind of mushroom-based origin, and the 2.0 version of that is where a lot of growth will be, in our opinion. And these products might not be the final food item that we eat. They might be ingredient adding the nutritional value to the mix, but it's still going on. And all of this complex, it requires the enzymes and cultures to grow the material, but also require specialist manufacturing equipment, specialist processing equipment to ferment this and kind of filter this and form it into some kind of palatable form. And all the ingredients that make it palatable and give it, as Graeme mentioned, the right mouthfeel, a funny but I think quite a descriptive way that the industry talks about it. So what are the investments implications of all that? Well, the numbers are, the potential in dollar terms is staggering. In 2020, McKinsey published a paper which maybe was too early and too exuberant, but it's still worth mentioning. They suggested that this TAM could become a $4 trillion market. So they argue, and I think that's valid, that up to 60% of the physical inputs in the global economy can be produced biologically. And some of that is biological materials done better, so kind of wood or animals or vegetable-based food. The remaining are non-biological that can become biological, such as plastics or fuels. So, we're talking about a big chunk of the world GDP. You can see why during the sort of technology and innovation boom of 2021 that really captured market imagination, the pioneers of synthetic biology, which is how this industry likes to be known, companies like Zymergen, Amyris, Ginkgo Bioworks, grew to a combined market capitalization of over 40 billion. And the plant protein pioneers like Oatly or Beyond Meat, again, several tens of billions worth of market capitalization. Cell-based protein companies were private and achieved very substantial private valuations. There's been a lot of disappointment. So some of these companies failed to build sustainable business models. Some went under. Other of these pioneers found that they don't really have a sustainable moat. A lot of big food companies, for example, moved into plant-based milk and were very competitive and successful using their brands. Some of those companies are still pre-product. They're still commercializing what they do at scale. It hasn't happened yet. But as you know, the way we look at innovation, we consider the whole value chain. The pioneers is one way to take advantage of the innovation and growth, but there are enablers and adopters who may present a better risk reward. And this is exactly that case with bioengineering, industrial bioengineering, or biosolutions, as this industry is sometimes called. So we do own Novonesis, which is a combination of Christian Hansen and Novozymes. And these two companies combined together are the leading vendor of enzymes and cultures for most end markets. Whether you're making cheese or wine or biofuel, chances are the bug that does the job and the enzymes that help that bug do that job come from Novonesis. And they have the biggest library of this biological materials and these biological creatures in that space known to humanity. We also own GEA Group, which is a leading supplier of food equipment, and they are particularly strong in precision fermentation equipment. And we think that's quite a growth market, and will continue to be a growth market for them going forward. And of course, these enablers are they supply both emerging and incumbent players in that space, and they're profitable, cash generative businesses, good balance sheets. So we stand to benefit from that growth, we believe, without taking undue financial risks in the near term. And in fact, the largest alternative protein facility currently operating, which is based in the US, combines those two companies' products. It is run by Novonesis and is built with GEA equipment. So with that, we'll bring the call to the close. I think we kept it to time, but I think bioengineering or biosolutions is another one of those. It's temporarily out of limelight. It sort of travels down the hype reality cycle. But if you gain exposure to that through companies that are real businesses, not science projects, that have built a sustainable, profitable, cash generative business model, you can have the patience to wait for investment case to play out. And that's exactly where we're finding ourselves. So with that, thanks very much for your attention, and look forward to speaking to you in a few weeks' time.
Thanks very much.